Again, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone. This is John Tobin from Trilio. I'm a solution architect. I'll actually be doing the next couple of sessions in this series. As many of you probably know, we're doing this every 2 weeks in a quick lightning talk format. So very lightweight. We like to keep it light in terms of humor as well. Really what we're trying to do is just introduce a couple of topics. We're also trying to make this very interactive. So one of the things that we took after our last session, which was our first session in this series, was the need to make it a little bit more interactive and for us to talk less, meaning for Kevin to talk less, because he's very wordy. And so we would appreciate it if you submit your questions. You can submit them directly to me, again, to John Tobin, and we'll take some time at the end. We're hoping to dedicate 10 minutes at least to questions at the end. So Kevin is a wealth of OpenStack knowledge. So if you have any questions about OpenStack upgrades, he can certainly answer them for you. And just for a housekeeping item, we're by default going to keep everyone on mute. But as I said, you can message me directly right in the Zoom window. Down at the bottom, you'll see chat. All right. So thanks. And with that, I will give it over to my colleague, the man, the myth, the legend, Kevin Jackson.
Yep. Thank you. Thanks, John. Thanks for that introduction. I just find it ironic that you talked even more than last time, when we were talking about reducing the amount of words we're going to use. But anyway, hello, everyone. As you can see, we are going to be talking about that lovely topic of OpenStack upgrades. Oops, let's click this button instead. So this is the agenda. We're going to keep it quite light. Obviously, a little bit of introductions. But we're going to be talking about OpenStack upgrade options. And as you will probably be aware, there really is only two, or a third, if you choose to not upgrade. But of course, there's only so many times you can ask Red Hat to extend the maintenance of OSP 10. So we're going to stick to just the two upgrade options here: the in-place upgrade and the parallel upgrade, also known as the lift and shift. And then hopefully we'll have time for Q&A, more time than last time. Right, click on here again. So what is the Ask the Expert series? So it's a regular series. We'll be running this every couple of weeks. Where you can come along and ask us questions, certainly in the realms of backup and recovery. Like John said, interaction is encouraged. So if you've got any questions or any challenges, fire them over to John. He'll collate them and we'll have a little discussion at the end. And the person that is most actively engaged will win a $50 Amazon gift card. But remember, the first rule about Expert Club: if we answer wrongly, marketing still reserve the right to call us experts for our next discussion in a couple of weeks. So just stick to the rules and we'll be good. So who are we? So obviously I'm Kevin Jackson. I work with our prospects here in EMEA. You can tell by my accent, I'm based in the UK. OpenStack turns 10 this year, and I've been using it and being abused by it since day one. And yes, I am surprised I still have her too. John, who you've just met during the introduction, is another of our senior SAs over in America. And you can tell, he's shown solidarity for my aging gray hair look by kindly desaturating his profile photo for this presentation. So thanks, John. And as John mentioned, he'll be presenting next time. So look out for those calendar invites if you don't have them already. So I keep being reminded to speed up a little bit. So I was told to keep this lightning talk, because it is a lightning talk, to 7 slides. And I said, hey, Justin, he's our VP of marketing. I said, hey, Justin, hold my beer. We're talking about OpenStack upgrades here. I can do this in 6. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right, I was spelling out painful. Now I'm allowed to call it painful because I love OpenStack. I'm allowed to call it painful, but one of the things I realize is it's not as it's not as dark and disastrous as I technically am making out. So I had to compromise on the messaging a little bit. So this is my compromise. I hope you will agree. And there's one thing I certainly wasn't going to compromise on, and that was going to be Comic Sans font. So with that out the way, let's dive straight into the nitty gritty of the choices you get when you've been told that we now need to upgrade OpenStack. So obviously there's two choices, the in-place and the parallel upgrade, also known as the lift and shift. But if we just concentrate on the in-place upgrade, an in-place upgrade is obviously where you are going from one particular version of OpenStack and you are performing an upgrade, and then out pops the new version at the end of that particular process. Now, of course, that sounds great. It's an ideal situation. And if it was ideal, we obviously wouldn't need this particular conversation. So for those less than ideal situations, there is another option, which is the parallel upgrade, or known as the lift and shift. The parallel upgrade is where you pre-stage your new version of your OpenStack environment. So say you're using the train release, so you pre-stage a small amount of, say, compute services and other ancillary services. And then the idea is you'll be migrating workloads from the old environment into the new environment, and then optionally bringing in that hardware as you grow and move that workload over. Eventually retiring the old version of OpenStack. So I think we've got that fairly well understood. So let's dive into the specifics of the in-place upgrade and look at the pros. So obviously, in terms of an in-place upgrade, no additional hardware is required. I think that's pretty obvious. You've got an installation of OpenStack. You are on a particular version, and the goal is to get to the next version. So there's no disruption apart from the maintenance to go from that old version to the new. It's certainly the least complex in terms of planning. It's a case of just follow the instructions from A to B, or well, probably in modern worlds, it's probably Q to T or something like that. And then in the grand scheme of things, from start to finish, it's probably the fastest upgrade option. And if anything, it's probably the fastest upgrade option end to end, because you're probably doing this during a maintenance period. If you specified a 6-hour maintenance period between, I don't know, midnight and 6 o'clock in the morning, and you are starting to hear, the birds sing and the sun come up, I can guarantee that you'll work a lot faster to get that upgrade completed by 6 o'clock before traffic starts to ramp up. So end to end, it probably is genuinely the fastest upgrade option of the two. However, where there's pros, there are obviously some cons, and it's worth understanding, the challenges around an in-place upgrade. So the cons, the downside is, despite the fact that you technically on paper, it probably is the least complex and the fastest upgrade option, there does come a varying or unknown amount of downtime, which is a bit of a shame, because if you think of an in-place upgrade, an in-place upgrade really means that you're replacing the control plane of OpenStack, and your compute nodes, where probably the vast majority of the important work is happening. Your virtual machines are running on there, and for the vast majority of that, say, maintenance period, those VMs are probably not being touched. However, depending on how you are performing that in-place upgrade, it's very hard to know when that service disruption is going to take place for those particular virtual machines. And in most scenarios, that service disruption is either when storage backends may disappear between an upgrade of one release to another, and almost certainly when network reconverges or services get restarted on the network side of things. So whilst the VMs might not get touched, might not be disrupted in themselves, from the outside and service disruption, it's very hard to know when that service disruption is going to take place. So you tend to put a maintenance window across the whole lot. I say there's no additional hardware required, but you probably find that you probably have been using some additional hardware anyway, because I would expect you to have tested this upgrade. We test things, right? Your backup plan in an in-place upgrade, you don't really have much room to maneuver. So in almost every single scenario, your backup plan is probably a forward fix. If something doesn't go right, some hard questions have to be answered. And in most scenarios, you end up having to forward fix and try and get these environments up and running based on, some troubleshooting, but you have to go forward. You're going to be bringing over legacy things. Now, it might be a problem. Really, from the running services, it probably isn't really that much of an overhead. The overhead is the cleanup side of things. My world used to be a lot of OpenStack Ansible, and changes from OpenStack Ansible from one version to another. At one point, there was a hangover of configuration files, from one version to the next. And again, those sort of things kind of like hang around, and if anything, just cause a little bit of friction. It's not a clean upgrade without all that tidying up behind. When it comes to operating system upgrades, that's part of this conversation. A lot of OpenStack has dependencies on libraries of the installed distribution you're using, and there's limitations. You can't stay on Xenial forever, for example. I put the missed opportunity as a con, missed opportunity for hardware refresh as a con. Obviously, it's not really a con. It's more of just a downside, a limitation. But again, you're using the hardware available rather than going to new. And then the last thing I'll just say is the fact that you're relying on the installation method to encompass the upgrade improvement. So whilst upstream might have the ability to have rolling upgrades of services and compute nodes, does your installation method actually adhere to this, or do they just use their own method of doing your upgrade? The lift and shift. So in terms of pros for the lift and shift, this is where you can upgrade or migrate your workloads in stages. So you've got your existing environment. At your leisure, you can migrate tenant by tenant your workload from old to new. You will have tested the new environment prior to using this. So, you've already have the confidence that your workloads will run successfully on your new upgraded environment. There's no hangover from existing code. There's no operating system upgrade conversations. And even the hardware, you have the ability to move from an old contract, maybe from one vendor, move to a new one, or take advantage of the new CPUs. Again, this is all part of the same maintenance. But of course, there's downsides to this as well. Of course, the one that stands out the most is the additional hardware required. This is an extra cost. It's extra space in your data center. You also have to have that process of migrating the workloads of virtual machines, network, storage over into the new environment. What do you do about bare metal? So virtual machines is well understood. It's the complications around ironic services. And then just an awareness, you're starting from fresh. Your audit tables in your database start from row 0, not from row 16,000. So again, just if you're dependent on audit history, you already probably have a process of offloading that elsewhere anyway, part of regulations, but just bear that in mind when you come to this. And the last thing is, are you really going to do a lift and shift every 6 months? I really don't think so. Whilst it has a lot of pros, it's a lot of forward planning. So where do we fit in? Where does Trilio fit in for these upgrades? And if we look at the in-place upgrade, first of all, it's just worth reiterating that TrilioVault is an OpenStack service. It's a native OpenStack service. And that's really, really crucial to understand when we talk about upgrades. So if you look at this particular scenario where you're going from Queens to Train, in this scenario, you'd be going from Queens to Rocky to Stein to Train. So that's how you do in-place upgrades across, multiple versions. And each one of those comes with risk. Every change, unfortunately, in IT, comes with risk. Where TrilioVault comes in is it's an OpenStack service that will protect your workloads during these upgrades. So you're making a lot of changes in your infrastructure. You want to be able to protect these. So utilize Trilio for safely storing those workloads whilst you have the confidence to go from Queens to Rocky to Stein to Train. And that's multiple maintenance windows just there. When it comes to the parallel upgrade, TrilioVault is instrumental. Now in this world, again, we're a native OpenStack service. So again, why would you not take advantage of a native OpenStack service when you can achieve either in place or parallel upgrades? But if you look at the parallel upgrade, we become instrumental into this. So the downside I talked before about the parallel upgrade is migrating the workloads off the old environment to the new. Without Trilio, you have to come up with that plan yourself. You have to work out how to get these virtual machines and disks and networks, the metadata, all that information, and bring them out of the existing environment and then bring them into new. With TrilioVault, again, it's seamless. We're a native service. We're part of this process. We're part of these environments. Take full advantage with TrilioVault sitting between those, leapfrog between Queens and Trains. And in this world, you're not going from Queens to Rocky to Stein to Train. You're going from Queens to Train. So we're about reducing risk. In fact, I'll start again. Look, every change comes with risk. When it comes to upgrades, I genuinely think there's a couple of things that stop people, or certainly give people heart attacks when people think of OpenStack upgrades. It's complex. The change is big. Well, if Trilio can be part of reducing that risk, then take full advantage. When it comes to things going wrong, ultimately, if you think about what you are doing in your OpenStack environment, that OpenStack environment isn't a way of just satisfying the fact that you can go to the OpenStack service and say, hey, I run OpenStack. No, you run OpenStack because it runs for a purpose. Those workloads run in your environment because that's the most appropriate place to run. Now, if things go wrong during your upgrade, what's the backup plan? Worst case, in an in-place upgrade, if you have safely stored your workloads, so those things, the things that are genuinely important for this environment, if you've stored them safely on TrilioVault, then at least you have the ability to spin up a brand new environment and fast track your parallel upgrade or a full repair of your existing attempt at an upgrade, and then just safely bring those workloads back to life again. Now, one of the things I think is missed is if you are hesitant at doing upgrades, that's not a great place to be. Upgrades exist for many reasons: security enhancements, performance enhancements, features, new features in the environment. So missing out is not good IT practice. If you can get to a place where you are keeping abreast with OpenStack upgrades every 6 months, for example, or close to, then you're in a much better place at managing your OpenStack estate. And with Trilio behind the scenes being able to give you that confidence, that can only be 100% an excellent thing for your environment. And the last thing I just want to say on this is, again, look, we're backup and recovery. We do protection of the data and the volumes and basically the tenant workloads. If at any point, downtime is occurred, you can always recover those workloads wherever it needs to be. I say we're there we've got your back, but it gives you choices. And certainly it is, in many scenarios, it's about 100% reducing that risk when you talk to your change boards. So in summary, I like to think that when to do in-place upgrades, and certainly leveraging TrilioVault, is if you are going through that cadence, upgrading very often. So in-place for very frequent upgrades, because that's what it's there to do. And that's the whole process. And of course, you can only do an in-place upgrade if additional hardware is not available. But we certainly are there to protect those workloads. And again, just to reiterate, TrilioVault protects those workloads. We don't back up OpenStack. We back up those things that are much more important. It's the user's workloads, the virtual machines, the data that runs those financial databases. We back all that up so you can recover them into your upgraded OpenStack environment if things go wrong in an in-place. And then the parallel, the last thing, if you're going to do leapfrog changes. So if you're going from really old OSP 10 to OSP 16, or even like a smaller from McQueen's to Train or Rocky to Train, you know, something where there's a little gap between the releases, certainly doing a parallel upgrade. If architectural changes are in there as well, absolutely, you're going to have a parallel upgrade there. But part of the puzzle, and I've suffered from this in previous roles, not having an ability to easily recover workloads or migrate from one to the other is a showstopper in a parallel upgrade world. TrilioVault is there for you. It's part of that parallel upgrade process. So hopefully I didn't talk too long. Maybe I did. I'm looking at the time, but we've got time for questions. So John, are there any questions that you can ask me? Ask us, sorry.
Yeah, Kev, we've got a couple coming in. Great job. I think it looks like there is some questions regarding migrations and the Ironic project in OpenStack. So how does that work, like in a lift and shift scenario, Kev?
Yeah. I shouldn't have ventured direct, should I? No, but I think Ironic is interesting because there's if you think about Ironic is about running workloads on a dedicated machine. So there's already a predefined choice to do that. But if you are choosing to do that, then already that data is either being, the important part of this is the data is either already on a share somewhere, so it's already, you know, somewhere else, or you accept the fact that this is a single point of failure anyway, because it's a single real dedicated machine. So my pushback on anything to do with Ironic is, what is the workload, and where is that data stored? It's the data that's more important at this point. Ironic in this world is you wanted to take advantage of the hardware, and you probably are storing data elsewhere. So that's probably stored on Cinder. So it might be Cinder attached volumes from this, or even a Cinder booted volume, in which case, let's migrate those Cinder volumes. But I would forget about the boot disk, as in the bare metal itself. I would create brand new bare metal machines and then import the workload back onto that, or import the data back into those Ironic nodes.
That makes sense. Good advice, Kev. I think our next question, we actually have two, and I think they dovetail well together. One is about what's that point of no return during an in-place upgrade, and the other is a question specifically regarding Trilio about how we manage the OpenStack database. So I think those two kind of go together a little bit.
Yeah, so I guess as soon as you pressed enter in terms of just starting the upgrade process, I think it's the point of no return. You know, if you think about, so this is more related to an in-place upgrade. So I think in an in-place upgrade, given the fact that you are basically changing things underneath yourself, it's very hard to go back. Now, it's worth understanding the OpenStack upgrade process, or certainly the roles that get played. You have a set of controllers that run the API and the machinery to do with OpenStack. And then, of course, you've got the compute nodes where your virtual machines run. And if you think about it, those virtual machines are technically just a KVM in the vast majority of worlds. I appreciate that people use different hypervisors, but go with this. They're just a KVM process. Now, those KVM processes are technically not touched during your upgrade process, unless it's dictated that you need to reboot those compute nodes, or if you have to do other actions to do with the hypervisor, and KVM gets affected. So that's the only time that they get affected. So we're really talking about the control plane here. And at that point, it just gets a little bit complex. I genuinely think that no matter where you are in your journey, you're going to have to go forward, unless you are lucky in the fact that whatever is happening in terms of the upgrade, it may be on a per controller basis. Bear in mind, your architecture is probably a 3-node control plane. And if one of those control planes has just been affected, but the other two aren't, or maybe two have, but the third one is still the original code, you do have the ability to redeploy your existing old version of OpenStack onto those existing controllers, and it just becomes a controller recovery at that point. But as soon as code gets changed, maybe databases get upgraded. So if you think of OpenStack isn't just replacing libraries, tables get changed, new databases, actually database probably won't get added unless you're adding new features, but tables might get altered. And depending on how those upgrade scripts and those database upgrade scripts are being written, would you trust going back? So I would always say that if you are doing an in-place upgrade, I think there's only a slim chance you could back out, and you've got to use caution. But most of the time, you'll be fixing forward. So almost immediately, but you could just be lucky. Is my answer.
So the answer is it's pretty much always a fix forward.
I would in almost all scenarios, unless you've got lucky and your upgrade scripts are tackle just one controller at a time. And given these days where you have orchestration scripts, which happily go, I'll talk to controller 1, 2, and 3 at the same time, then it's very difficult to manage in that particular scenario.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And I'm sorry, Kev, I might have missed it. Did you address the specific question about Trilio and how we interface with the OpenStack database itself?
Yeah, so again, we don't touch the database itself. So part of the machinery obviously manages its own table. So like Nova has its Nova database and things like that. But you will appreciate the fact that if you're going from Nova version 10 to Nova version 16, or like Queens to train, things will change. So those database those engine databases are part of OpenStack. It's a little bit of a black box unless you go diving into the code. And why would you? As an administrator of OpenStack, you want to perform a function upgrade. You don't want to be doing table maintenance. But those table maintenance scripts, they are greatly written these days in how they do database versioning. However, there could be projects which don't adhere to the rules, and in which case, if a database gets changed, so we're talking the OpenStack databases themselves, if one of those tables gets changed and maybe a column gets dropped, I mean, would you know how to recover that? No, you probably end up forward fixing.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. I think, I know that we're at the top of the hour. We have one more question. I think we'll fit it in. And for everybody's information, we do record this and we will be posting it to both our YouTube channel and Trilio. So, if you need to drop, please go ahead. You can always look at the recording to find out the answer to this question. But Kev, I think, you and I have talked to many different customers who are fearful of OpenStack upgrades, and they're back a ways, right? They might be on Newton, they might even be before that, right? They might be back on, the KL, any one of those releases of OpenStack, right? And they want to go forward. They're just very concerned about how they're going to get there, given that they've waited so long, right? OpenStack moves quickly. So, what about those scenarios where customers have to jump many, many versions, and OpenStack has changed a lot in that time? Like, how can they? How does that happen?
Yeah, you're talking about old versions of OpenStack. You're sending me to my dark place. But no. So in those kind of scenarios, you definitely wouldn't do an in-place upgrade. 100%. You'd be doing a parallel migration. So you'd have the world of, you've got your existing old version. Could be Essex. Imagine that. So you could be on like this old architecture, old version, but you've got your workloads, your valid workloads. Mm-hmm. Maybe not Essex. I mean, obviously that's going really, really high. I reckon there's people on the call that's probably not even old enough to know Essex. But anyway, so if you've got a version which allows us to go from, say, Icehouse to something latest, I say you would install Trilio. In our world, you would install Trilio onto the old environment. You would use that to take those workloads off and then bring them into the new environment. There's no limitations. I mean, technically, we're talking software and software advances. Even back in OpenStack, the metadata type things probably didn't exist to what they rely on today, for example. So you're having to work within the realms of what was available at the time to what is now. But there's there's certainly an opportunity to have us take the workloads and then import into the new environment. And of course, there's little things there. Look, we're not we are aware of the limitations of OpenStack back then, and we're an OpenStack native service. So we'll back up what we know back then. And if anything is missing during a parallel upgrade, the small details, we can easily fill in the dots. But yeah, there's no real limitation. The only limitation, like I said, is whether or not Trilio, if we're talking very specifically Trilio, supports that particular version of OpenStack. So you can do the offboarding to do the onboarding.
Makes sense, Kev. Makes sense. Thanks for the information. I'm sure it's helpful for people out there to know that they have an option, even if they've been avoiding the upgrade. I think that's it for our questions. So I guess the only thing left to do is to wrap up, right? We do have another webinar in this series coming up on June 11th, which unfortunately you'll have to hear more of me for. If you have anything at all, any questions, please reach out to Kevin or myself. Our email addresses are on the screen, but it's just first name dot last name at trilio.io. Also, we'd like to announce our raffle winner. I'm not sure if this person's still on, but it's Kareem Bleedy. Hopefully I didn't butcher that last name too bad, or the first name. But we'll be reaching out to Kareem. If you know him or her, please let us know.
Cool. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for your time, everyone. We appreciate it.
Thanks.